We were sent into the firing line at 6 a.m. My first position was 30 yards from the enemy. 50 yards further along, I observed the enemy's fire and also a long line of our own dead along the brow of the hills. We were hustled into the trenches last night at about 10 p.m. as an attack was expected from the Turks. It came off too at 4 a.m. None of us will ever forget it, I'm sure, as it was our first real fight, and we were in a bad position, being open to an attack on our left flank. The enemy came on in masses to our left towards the New Zealand trenches. It was a poor sort of a charge. The men seemed to huddle together, sometimes advancing a little and then retreating again, just like a mob of sheep being herded along, which we imagine they were by their officers, who were mostly German. We poured into a hot fire, climbing out of our trenches to do so. It was here we lost nearly all our men in the fight, for they had a machine gun trained on that corner. However, our losses were nothing compared to the Turkish. They went down in hundreds. We had a terrible shock this morning. Sergeant Paul, who shares our dugout with us, came in for a snack. And while we were having it, an explosive bullet struck him, almost blowing the top of his head off. Sniper's work, and it goes on all day. Nearly a dozen casualties every day on our way up the gully. Least to be shot in our own dugout in cold blood. It nearly drives one mad. It makes us all feel very sick. Particularly myself, for I was standing behind him and his blood and brains were smashed all over my face. I was standing behind him and his blood and brains were splashed all over my face. And then a few days later, it says, I was just cooking breakfast when I was shot by a sniper. The shock was horrific. I felt as if I'd been struck by a shell. There was a hideous crack that probably came by breaking bone, and I knew at once that my thigh had gone. They dragged me back into the shelter and the agony was awful. Our first aid boys put a bandage round it and carried me into the field hospital. They examined and sent me down to the beach, where they put me under chloroform and put in a splint. I was then sent to the hospital ship soon after. I was very pleased when I saw Nurse King, and she told me I was to be her patient. I was put under chloroform again, this time having a wire splint put on. After a conversation with my doctors today, they told me that I would have to have my leg off. Hard luck, but I'm satisfied with his explanation.